So public relations is an umbrella term, and that is my profession is PR, and it encompasses many pieces, such as media relations, writing key messages, um, social media, of course, is a big part of PR these days, reputation management, getting it, speaking engagements, all sorts of things to present an individual or an organization, and in my case, I work with many nonprofits, and present them to the world in the most positive light so that people will understand their mission and be compelled to support it. So there's this strategy of making sure that an organization's mission is well understood and clear to people, as well as compelling. And the storytelling component is that you always have to put a human face on a cause and a mission. It's not enough to tell people we do XYZ, but to actually show them with stories and success stories about the people they serve or the community that they serve. That is a much more impactful way to communicate. And so it's the combination of the strategy and the storytelling. And as my tagline says, all of my work is about promoting social good organizations.
Right. Well, what drew you to the intersection of those of strategy, storytelling, and social good?
Yeah, this is one of my favorite stories, which is how I got started in this particular field and in the do-gooding world. I was raised in a very do-gooding household. Both my parents were in the medical field. My father was a plastic and reconstructive surgeon. He specialized in, like I said, a lot of reconstruction and repairs. My mother was a therapist as well as an occupational therapist, and they were always out doing good beyond their own personal professions. So my father would often go on missions around the world. He was part of Operation Smile, which works with cleft palates. He would
Oh
go
my gosh.
Nicaragua and devise, they at that point in time they were having a lot of problems with their stoves blowing
There,
up and hurting their
okay.
stoves, with fires and having people get burned and those sorts of things. And so he would go and do that missionary work in addition to his very busy practice at home. And so I just grew up with that as part of my ethos, and knew that I wanted to do some something good with my career. But unlike my parents, and as well as now my brother and my sister-in-law, I am not a good one-on-one caretaker, and I know that about myself. I, first of all, medically, professionally, I can't stand the sight of blood. But even like individual, I'm much better on a bigger scope with a bigger scope. And I took a career test, did some career testing when I was shortly out of college because or just about to graduate actually, because I didn't know exactly what I wanted to do. But I knew it would be somewhat different than what my parents were doing. And what kept coming up in all my career testing was communications, which, there's what organization and individual doesn't need communication,
Right.
right? It's across the board. So it's a great profession for any industry. But again, I knew I wanted to do something good, and I discovered this niche in communications, which when I was going into the business was called social marketing.
Oh,
So this is pre-social media. And what social marketing is taking the principles of communication and applying them for good causes.
hmm.
And I was lucky enough to end up so I started in the PR profession doing I was actually in hospitality PR for a little while, for a couple of years, which was a great training ground because I had access to everything under the communication umbrella. I was doing community relations, employee communications, sports marketing. We had a, just, travel and tourism. So that was wonderful. It was a wonderful training ground, but it wasn't completely fulfilling my desire to
Yeah.
do social good. And I ended up going back to grad school and um, ended up in a professor's class that was all about social marketing and took a bunch of classes. So, as an example, one of the case studies that we studied with that particular professor was the Nestle milk substitute. I'm gonna not remember exactly where this was, but Nestle used to market their milk products in developing countries.
Yes, absolutely.
Baby formula.
Largely in African countries.
Yes, exactly. And as baby formula, right? And it kind of eschewed the idea that breast milk was the better alternative, and
Yes.
the babies were getting sick because the water quality was so bad.
Hmm.
And so there was a big public education campaign about educating the people in those communities about the better health effects of breast milk, why they shouldn't be using the Nestle formula, those kind of
Right.
things. So that is a very traditional case study that if you're in that field, those that's one that's very well studied. And so that
Fascinating.
started me on the path of doing communications for social good.
Yes. Before you mentioned Operation Smile, I was going to tell you a story. And then when you said that, oh my God, listen to this connection.
Okay.
I did some work with medical missions for children,
Mm-hmm.
who are the people, the surgeons, the dentists, the doctors who go around helping people with cleft palate
Yes.
and birth
Yes.
defects. So
Yes.
when you were talking about telling stories, when I worked with them, they
Mm-hmm.
had banners, like very tall banners with photos of the children and their parents and families. And so, and they were displayed in the room in such a way that you saw, and they took so much pride in the work they did. And you see the smile, the children's beautiful smile after the surgery. So
Yeah.
then you mentioned Operation Smile, and I'm pretty sure there's an overlap between these two organizations.
Yeah, there must be. Yeah,
Uh-huh.
sure. Mm-hmm.
That's really funny. Um, so lovely. And um, as you think about you're working for social good, you're doing the piece about communication, which
Mm-hmm.
encompasses all the things you mentioned.
Mm-hmm.
Can you tell me more about your vision for the world you're trying to create?
Mm. Um, yes. I guess what it boils down to is just trying to decrease people's suffering. And, that can come in all forms. I mean, I have worked for nonprofits in multiple different industries. I've worked in the homelessness space, I've worked in the environmental, healthcare, social justice, mobility, and transportation. And I mean, there's the reducing suffering, and then there's making the community better, which kind of go hand in hand. And so if I had to put, one point on it, would be just reducing suffering for individuals and communities and the people who are served by the mission of the organizations.
Is it necessarily the point that the communications that you work on,
Mhm.
that the purpose is to engage other people to care about the mission of that organization?
Partially, yes. I mean, I mentioned public education campaign with the Nestle case study, right? So a lot of the work that I have done are literally designing public education campaigns for behavior change. One early example of that in my career was I was part of a PR agency that specialized only in environmental and social issues in Los Angeles when the first curbside recycling program was rolled out. The first in the country, the largest in the country.
Wow.
And our job in my PR agency was to educate the public in single family residences about recycling, trash, what to put in what bin, how to sort, all of those kind of things. So that wasn't necessarily getting people to care about the mission of the organization. That was very specifically a public education campaign that again made the community better and the planet better, right? Of course, a lot of the other work I do is getting exposure, positive exposure for nonprofits who are, doing good things in the world, which all of them are, and getting funders and donors and volunteers to be excited about the mission and hopefully contribute and support the mission.
Hmm. As I'm not an expert in marketing, I'm just
Mhm.
trying to figure out in my mind, I think in Venn diagrams.
Yeah,
So there's the public education piece,
yeah.
and then there's education, let's say for the funders and foundations to give money to support the organization.
Hmm.
And then you have this piece, I suppose, of crisis management, which is
Hmm.
to make sure that, as I said, that the company gets ahead of whatever mistakes they made to
Right.
continue to be seen in the good graces of the public, right?
Yeah. Yes.
Is there anything, is there any other purpose that we haven't mentioned in that list?
Uh, um,
Because you're doing healing, you're trying to,
yeah.
because you're supporting these nonprofits
Hmm.
for the social good, and you're actually promoting the social good by helping them with their communications.
Yes. So, I'm not sure if there's anything that hasn't been mentioned, but you captured the gist of it for sure. Yes.
Mhm.
And crisis communications is not always a part of it, because crisis communications is very specific, of course, to a crisis itself. I do try to get my clients to have some sort of crisis plan in place because stuff happens. And it's also not always a mistake. I mean, sometimes an organization screws up and does something bad. And yes, that's obviously a mistake that you need to manage. But there's also external factors that happen, like a natural disaster
Oh,
or I mean, one of my most recent examples is that I had a client who um that they were being smeared. They were the victim of an online smear campaign.
well,
So they didn't actually do anything untoward, but because of some animosity from an outside source, they were victimized that way. So there's a lot of different ways that crises can come up. Um, but it's always a good idea to plan as best you can. And the way that you do that is by anticipating scenarios that may happen. And there are some scenarios that you just simply never imagined in a million years, right? Like, for example, I worked the 9/11 crisis, and who's prepared for that, right? I mean, certainly organizations can prepare for, potential terrorism or I don't know what accidents, but and COVID, who predicted COVID, But if you have some basic crisis plans in place, you can adapt them as needed, based on whatever happens. So
mhm,
it's always look, it's always different, right? You can plan and plan and plan and anticipate, and this is true for any communications um, campaign. Is is you do the best you can with your tools and your knowledge and what you're trying to accomplish, and then something comes along and you have to pivot and go a different direction and manage something. And that's a lot of what PR is,
Mhm.
is the best laid plans. Um, and then something either wonderful or potentially challenging comes along, and it's like, oops, got to go this way. So that's
Mhm.
part of what I actually really like about it.
Mm. You talked about the recycling campaign, I think, in LA.
Yes.
And you did mention Nestle,
Hmm.
which is a little bit different. Not sure if that was for the social good. I mean, they were selling.
Right, but the point of that is that the social good campaign was educating the
Oh,
locals
yeah,
about the dangers of the Nestle product. So
got
that's
it.
yeah, that's a
Different.
but it's also a behavior change, right? You're trying to instill a behavior change in the people in that community.
Hmm. Well, I find that fascinating as a purpose that the communication would lead to behavior change because I'm not sure that that's often the purpose of the work that you're doing. Would that be right?
Well, in some cases it is, yes.
What's an example of that?
Well, the recycling campaign is an
Oh, yeah.
example.
Hmm.
Yeah, a very straightforward one. Yeah. Um, Give me a minute and I'll think of some others. But that's a
Can you
very
think of one that had a particularly a healing outcome?
a healing outcome.
Healing of a community, healing of
Yeah.
people, an organization, something?
Um,
Healing dimension,
Pardon me? A
a
healing
healing dimension.
dimension. I'm sure I have to run through my list of clients.
It's fine if not. It's just something that I find interesting.
I the last job that I had as a full-time employee was with the Society of Critical Care Medicine, and
Mm,
I was the marketing manager. And part of my job, we're it's a medical association, right? So the members are doctors that work in various disciplines of critical care, which includes many. Um, so certainly part of my job was about attracting members and holding the medical meetings and that sort of thing and getting people to come. But another part of my job was getting the public to understand what critical care is and what the critical care continuum is. And so that was partially getting the public to understand, as well as there was a lot of advocacy around that in terms of, you know, the politicians and the health insurance providers and all of that. So you could say that was, a healing
hmm.
campaign, so to speak. Yeah.
Would this, with the way that I'm thinking about it, would this be correct? That if you educated the public to have a better understanding about critical care, that
Mhm.
it would lead us, the citizens, to either advocate for particular changes, advocate with our elected officials, support particular campaigns to improve the quality of critical care in our communities.
Mm-hmm.
Is that right?
Yes.
Uh-huh.
Yes.
Okay,
Yes.
got it. Um, Wonderful. So you came from this background in your family. Your parents were very involved in the social good.
Mm-hmm.
And it sounds like you took this in very early on.
Mm-hmm.
May I ask you where you learned your sense of agency, the sense that I can actually have impact on people, I can have impact on the world and the way people do things around here.
Mm-hmm. Um, I mean, certainly it was that realization that I could use the discipline of communications for social good, which, happened a little bit over time with learning that that was a good career for me, that it suited me from a skill set standpoint, that there was this discipline of social marketing that existed. Um, but also, I think it's funny, I just posted on LinkedIn about this today to somebody, it might have been to your post, I don't remember exactly, but that in graduate school, when I was focused on the discipline of social marketing, I was tapped by a couple of professors there to help them with a project, which was a brand new project of there was a produce, a gentleman that owned a produce market in downtown Los Angeles, a very large produce market. And he was seeing all of this produce go to waste that was edible yet not saleable. And so he came up with the idea of giving away that edible but not saleable produce. And there weren't mechanisms to actually make that happen. And so I don't know how my professors got connected to this particular gentleman, but they did, and they brought me in to help. They had developed a system, and they brought me in to help um, uh, codify that system so that it could be done in other cities around the country.
Oh, interesting.
So I studied the one that was being built in Los Angeles, the infrastructure and the logistics and all of that, which are actually pretty simple. The food truck goes to the produce mart from the food bank and they pick it up but there was also a similar model happening in Houston at the time. And
Mm.
so they sent me to Houston to study that. And then with those two models, what I did is I wrote a workbook.
Oh,
And I actually still have it somewhere. I'm looking for, I can't remember the title, but it was a great title. I'll have to get that. And, that's a direct healing on the community. And that wasn't about fundraising because the gentleman that started the program had the funds to do it
right,
himself. And he actually paid the school and the professors to create this workbook so that the idea could be implemented in other cities.
right. Fascinating because what resonates for me is I was in a cafe in a coffee, not shop, but it was within a bookstore. And it
Oh,
was the end of the day, and they had these shelves of pastries left. And
mm-hmm,
I said, can I take those and give it to some restaurant somewhere? And they said, no, you can't, because they have a policy where you cannot do that.
mm-hmm.
And
The
I
health
thought,
department.
that's what?
So is it the health department or just the store's policy?
I'm not sure.
Mm,
And I thought, that doesn't sound right to me. So I went to ask people in my town, and they said, oh, just wait because we're building a town fridge,
oh, yeah.
refrigerator.
Community
Right.
fridges. Mm-hmm,
Community fridge.
mm-hmm. Yep.
And then, so now people can go to the coffee shop or the bakeries, the stores, and collect the goods and deliver them to the fridge. So, what it turns out, to your point, is it might not only be fundraising, there might be policies that need to change. And the town had to put out the funds to buy this community fridge and set it up. And it's
Mm-hmm.
not far from my house. And when I saw it, I was just delighted because now there's room for those pastries.
Yeah. Yeah.
Uh-huh.
Yeah.
That's a great example.
Yes, it is. Yeah.
Mm-hmm. Um, is there anything I kind of want to ask if there's any internal work you need to do to prepare yourself to do this work? And there may not be, but I work with a lot of coaches for whom this is resonates. So
Mm-hmm.
you can just tell me if it doesn't resonate for you.
Okay. And what's the question again?
Is there any internal work? What is the internal work that you might need to do to prepare yourself to take on the PR work in all of its
Yeah.
flavors?
Yeah. Well, I mean, I have a couple of answers for that. PR itself, no matter what industry you're in, whether you're in tech or entertainment or social good, or consumer goods, whatever it is, it's a hard job. And in fact, it's always listed as one of the top most stressful professions.
Really?
Yeah, and it's because it's so unpredictable and there's so much behind the scenes work that we do every day. And there's really there's no limit. Like there's no stopping point, right? Um, I'll give you an example of part of PR is media relations. So that's trying to land stories, news stories in the media. It used to be a lot easier to do that. It is very, very challenging to do that in this day and age because journalism is so thinly staffed, right? There's so much competition for what news sources there are. There's so much competition for attention. Um, and it's just it's never guaranteed. It's never guaranteed. So if anybody ever finds a PR person who says, I guarantee you I'm going to get you a feature in the Wall Street Journal, probably not. That's a red flag. But so even if you do, so let's say I land a great feature in the Wall Street Journal for a client, which probably would take a tremendous amount of effort to make that happen. Um, but then it's like, okay, fantastic, great. That's, of course, it's the Wall Street Journal, and then you've got all this longevity with this article. You can put it out on social media, it's on your website. Um, there's all sorts of things you can do with it, and it's there forever, right? But then what about the next hit, right? What about the New York Times? What about CNN? So there's always more to do. And the other thing about that is, regardless if it's a news media story, or if it's a social media post, or if it's a newsletter that you send out on behalf of the organization, or a speaking engagement, or whatever it is often very, very hard to make a direct correlation between the article that comes out or the social media post that comes out and the effect that you've had on an individual to get involved in the organization or to donate money or to whatever. And sure, there are many examples where you send out a newsletter, making a plea for donations, and 5 people click through and you get $500, right? That's very obvious. What's less obvious is um, a social media post, and there's so many lurkers on social media, right? And they may not engage directly, they may not like, or they may not comment, or they may see it 3 months ago and then remember something and want to get involved. And so that part, the combination of always there's always more to do, there's always more to do, and the challenge of showing impact from PR, those two
Yes.
things make it very stressful.
Yes.
It also makes it very exciting,
Hmm.
because there is always something more that you can do, and you can try this. This isn't working, you try this, and so there's plenty of outlets for the PR, but it can be challenging. And now I don't remember what your original question
But
was.
that's fine because you took us to an interesting place, and I could imagine the challenge and the stress behind the fact
Oh,
that there's so much competition for our awareness
yes,
and, appealing to us for funds, for donations. And
yeah,
there's a limit to what we can take in. So you might feel like you're competing with all of these other uh,
yeah,
very worthwhile concerns,
for sure.
but our attention is limited. So I
Yeah.
could imagine that being challenging.
And then, what the formula that people talk about is that your audience needs at least 7 touch points or
Yeah,
reminders to even move them to do anything,
right,
And so there's this constant battle of how much do we need to keep nudging people versus it's too much, it's overwhelming. Um, and again, there's data that you can look at, et cetera, et cetera. And there is some science behind that formula. A lot of you don't know.
right, right.
So, but that's also keeps it exciting. It
Hmm.
does. Yeah.
Joanna, it's been awfully fun talking with you. I've learned a lot from this conversation. Is there anything that I haven't asked you that you would particularly like to share?
Um, Let me see. Ah, oh, what's something else that you would like to know or learn about?
I mean, you've given me a full picture. I might be curious about the circling back to where you started with your family.
Mm-hmm.
Like, what
Mm-hmm.
did that look like as your parents saw you go out into the world and do this
Yeah.
work? Like, what's that conversation at the kitchen table like?
Okay, this is a great story to end on, and it will bring it full circle. So I told you about my father, and one of the he was he's passed away, but he was one of the foremost experts in breast reconstruction and
Whoa.
particularly in silicone breast implants.
Uh-huh.
And he studied them for years and years and years. And I remember driving around Los Angeles, like picking up breast milk samples from women who had breast implants because when he went at the height of this, there were some concerns about the health impact of leaked silicone on women, and a particular, I think it was rheumatoid arthritis or something. And so he was at the forefront of that study and those concerns, and he was the foremost researcher on it. There was an advocacy group that was adamantly opposed to silicone breast implants and was threatening to, deregulate or ban them. And my dad was a firm believer based on science that there weren't issues. And so I actually got my start in crisis communications watching him and then eventually helping him take on that issue on a national stage. And that meant lots of news programs that he was the expert resource on, watching him go to, Capitol Hill and advocate like that. I actually produced an educational brochure about the pros and cons of breast implants. And so yeah, that's where I got my first taste of crisis communications because of him.
Wow. And
Yeah.
so as a result of his work, did he convince people that the breast implants are safe and it's going to be okay for the women who are breastfeeding that they can get their milk despite having an implant?
Yes. Yes.
Wow. Bravo to him. I hope that he got some recognition for doing
Yeah.
that.
Oh, if you look him up and put in the right keywords, there'll be a lot of stuff online, I'm sure. Yeah.
Oh, bravo.
Yeah.
Well, thank you for that story. Thank you for this conversation. This has been
Thank
really
you.
fun, Joanna.
Thank you so much. It's been a pleasure.
Yeah, so let me just turn off the recording.